states. Florida had a 57% of all voters.
Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, ladies. Welcome. Excited to see some of the people I know and don't know. Can you hear me? You can put your hands up. Hi, Patty. Good to see you. Hi, Kathleen. Hi,
We can
Kelly.
you.
Hi, Marie.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Sonia. Hi, Elizabeth. Good to see you.
I want to go on screen.
Hey, hi, Melody. Hey, Beth. Hi, Zura. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Priyanka. Leslie, good to see you. Vanessa,
Hi,
how are you, Vanessa? Hope you're,
I'm okay. I'm in Albuquerque now.
oh my goodness, thank goodness.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, thank you.
Vanessa's in our LA contingency.
Yes.
And for anyone who is in LA, I just want to express my deepest solidarity with you and to please in the chat today, or if you have any organizations that you know are doing good work in LA right now on the ground, to please share those in the chat so that people can support what's going on in Los Angeles. Okay, so we are here today for State of the World Women. This is day one of our feminist leadership formula. I'm actually going to be live streaming, so let's hope I can figure out how to do this. Okay, live stream and live. Okay, so as we are waiting for the live stream to start, if you could just put into the chat, where are you calling in from or zooming in from? Where are you calling in or zooming in from? Where are people calling or zooming in from? Albuquerque, DC. That's right, Zura. Providence, DC. St. Petersburg, New York. Okay, fabulous. I am in Washington, DC as well. Hence why I'm such a political junkie, like everyone in DC. Let me just share my screen. Okie dokie. So we are here for the feminist leadership formula. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about this as the days go on, but essentially I created something called the Women's Leadership Challenge, which you're going to be hearing about over the next 9 days, which was really an experiment. I realized when I was working with women's rights activists at Ashoka that the prescriptions and the things that we've been taught about leadership were mostly from white, Western, male corporate America. There was lots of good there. There's lots to learn. I love a lot of the old leadership practitioners, but I also realized working with women's rights activists and with women that there was a different way to lead that wasn't being captured. I also realized that systems change and social change leaders were not really being captured in the literature. Many of them were called activists, but they weren't called leaders. And yet they were doing the hardest things. They were the ones ending genital mutilation in their village and stopping human trafficking in India and getting laws and policies passed on domestic violence legislation, but they were called activists, not leaders. And
Uh, this is my client, the girl that's running this.
And we always have that one thing. And so, what I realized is that we really need to reframe leadership from a woman's point of view. The other thing that I really saw is I've been coaching women for 15 something years. I don't want any more women crying in my office because they're experiencing toxic leadership, or men for that matter. And I think that we really need to look at and figure out how do we create workplaces. Oops, froze for a second. How do we create workplaces where people can flourish, right? Not just where, can people hear me still? Hopefully, am I freezing? Okay, thanks. Can always kind of cat. How do we create not just workplaces where people, are okay, whatever, but how do we really create environments where people flourish? We spend so much time at work, and yet so many people have just an abjectly horrendous time in the workplace and are unfulfilled, uninspired, do not reach their levels of full potentials, do not have support from their managers or leaders. Most leaders don't know how to lead because they're never given the skills. And so we end up in this place where we have a lot of people who are in really bad work environments. And I've seen the way that it destructs their mental health, and I've seen the way that it really disempowers them and takes away the contribution that they could make to the world because they're in this situation that has gaslit them and made them think that they are not capable of what they are truly capable of. And that's what I help to reinvigorate them with. So that's a little bit about why we're here. And also, if you could put into the chat too, I said where you're from, but if you put in also your title and your organization and your LinkedIn profile, there was actually a study that showed that men tend to have way more LinkedIn connections than women. So we really need to up our professional networking as well. And that's the other reason I'm here is because I am kind of sick of men having an old boys club, but then women don't seem to have those circles, and or if they do, they become gossipy and backbiting, and that doesn't help anyone. So in my house, there's no gossip, there's no backbiting. It's only encouraging, supporting one another, which doesn't mean that we don't look at each other's blind spots and help give insight to those, because that's also important as well. And as I mentioned, so I'm a speaker on leadership, all different genres of anything that falls under the leadership bucket, from navigating change to women's leadership to resilience to collaboration to managing different personality styles. I give workshops and trainings on all different types of topics. I also have a team of facilitators under me globally that do trainings on all different leadership topics. And I'm an executive coach, and I have a team of executive coaches globally as well. We're often brought into companies to do executive coaching and or to design leadership accelerator programs for staff, not just women, based upon the most cutting edge research, neuroscience, the latest trends, and doing training that actually works. And doesn't suck, because most training is boring. So I made it an aim of my company to make it not boring and really fun, interactive, exciting, and emotionally transformational, frankly. I also am working on a book called Your Intrinsic Power Map. That will be my first book, which is going to be about tomorrow's class, which is the proprietary process that I've designed to find your intrinsic power without getting external validation. My second book that I'm working on is about feminist leadership, and the third book is about navigating change. So those are the three that I'm working on slightly harebrainedly simultaneously. Is anyone else an author here? Put your book in the chat. I'd love to know. Author, filmmaker. I know Vanessa's a filmmaker. If anyone here is an author, filmmaker, has a book, has a TED Talk, put it in the chat. Let others see that. Okay. These people. Okay. Everyone hear me? I love technological issues. They're so fun. Okay, let's just go back to here. Okay, so can y'all still see my screen? Yep. Okay, cool. Sorry, my second screen keeps freezing for some reason. Okay, so moving on. I also host a podcast and YouTube show called Samantha Politics, which has been really interesting. I started it because women I saw that women's voices weren't being elevated in the foreign policy space, and my master's is in women's foreign policy, and I also saw, or excuse me, is in foreign policy from Fletcher. I know there's some Fletcher people on here, and I also saw that often our voices were not being, the feminist view in foreign policy wasn't being looked at. Our policy from a foreign policy perspective is heavily dependent on military assistance and not as dependent as I think it should be on supporting civil society actors. So I've done shows on about 60 different countries, all with either female guests or feminist guests or guests that kind of have some interesting viewpoints to explore. So that's my YouTube show and podcast. And it's given me a lot of lens into comparing countries and also seeing what's going on in countries in parallel, and which also can project warning signs for America, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, unfortunately. I already spoke about Empower Global, but the company I lead, the last thing that we're working on right now is a cross-cultural leadership course, which is a course to basically equip employees with cross-cultural skills to be able to work better across nations and borders. I saw that diversity is often represented. It's just age, race, gender, and there's not a lot of cultural training, and yet there's more and more global companies and global organizations. So that's a cross-cultural course we're working on with Dr. Bertoni. Just some of our clients, just so you know, AB InBev, Distilled Spirits Council, IE, Salsify, Slalom, Verizon, Monday, Amazon, tons of different global clients. These are our values as a company, but I also want you to take a look at these because from a feminist leadership perspective, I really like these from this C's kind of this C's portion. And I also think that, the first one, courage is not the traditional white horse jumping into battle in armor and whatever it is. Courage is the courage to say no, the courage to set boundaries, the courage to do things differently, the courage to take a new stand, the courage to carve a new path, the courage to do something that you're scared to do, the courage to show up here today, even though you have no idea who I am and had no idea what to expect, the courage to jump into uncertainty. There's so much that encompasses courage that I think is not illustrated. Community, we really need community more than ever. And like I mentioned, the US has been having a crisis of loneliness. The Surgeon General has said, Vivek Murthy, the US is in a crisis of loneliness. People need human connection more than ever. And yet we still have this myth of the single family home. Kelly, you have a question?
Just noting you're not seeing the chat, but none of us are seeing your slides advance. We still all see the Who Am I slide.
Thank you. Okay, that's connected again now. Thanks, Kelly. I think my second screen disconnected and it messed it up. Thank you for the heads up. Okay, so community. Community is just so critical in today's time. And with the Women's Leadership Challenge, one of the things I really wanted to do was to create an awesome community of women who have meaningful, deep connections with one another that go beyond the surface, that go beyond, the transactional business cards and hellos and LinkedIn connections, but really go deep to the human experience. Collaboration, right? That we're in an environment where, new leadership and what people want is a more collaborative environment and less top-down leadership. We'll hear about that in the class on feminist leadership principles. Co-design. How do you design things together? Whether it's one of my students, Rachel Cadell Monroe, really interesting woman. She's working with Doctors Without Borders, and in the past was a chief of mission at Doctors Without Borders. And when she was chief of mission, often saw that Doctors Without Borders would prescribe a solution for a community on the ground without actually doing local consultations on the ground with those actors to understand what would work in that environment. Her organization, Sea Change Initiative, actually works in concert with communities, for example, in Peru on domestic violence, to figure out how does that community decrease domestic violence, what solutions will actually work within that country context, and then designs a solution with Doctors Without Borders and that proving community to create something that actually works. So co-design works more. Compassion is obvious, and connection. I hate talking for too long without getting to you all. So let's go to this slide and then we'll go back to the agenda. So I know some of you, I don't know some of you. What are you doing here? I would love to know, and I'm sure everyone wants to know, why did you decide to show up to the Feminist Leadership Formula? Where do you see yourself going as a leader in 2025? Just put it in the chat. Or if you'd like to come off mute, I'm also happy to hear some other voices besides my own. I get sick of hearing myself talk sometimes. Okay, reproductive rights. Yep. Okay, leadership training, but not a feminist lens. It's most times the case. An expert and mentor younger females. Yep. Amazing speaking engagements around Vanessa's film is about the first female president of Taiwan. And being an international speaker. Female lens on leadership. Being in a male-dominated industry. Yep, voice more heard to grow in the business. Unlocking strengths. General manager for a group of 150 women in Colombia. Amazing. You must know Mariana. Is that how you came here, Natalia? Mariana, yes.
Yes, that's exactly why I'm here. She sent the info today and I was eager to come here.
Oh, good. Mariana is amazing. She's also an alumni, and she runs an organization called, actually, Natalia, you want to describe it?
She's part of Movilizatorio and part of Women in Connection. This is an organization of over 150 leaders in Colombia. And what we do is we want to work towards like gender equality, but in the corporate sector. So I'm here because she invited me to be part of this. So it's amazing.
And Mariana is going to be speaking on our day on creating change. Her organization, she calls it like a civic social action
Yeah.
participatory laboratory. They've done amazing work around the Colombian peace process, getting women's rights included within that, on education policy in Latin America. She's fabulous feminist leader.
She's
Awesome.
one of our leaders. I'm not actually part of Movilizatorio, that's her company, but she's one of the leaders that's part of Women in Connection. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
Gracias, Natalia. And yes, women do make extraordinary leaders and business owners, but we're often not represented. Adding to the tool belt, fabulous career progression, underprivileged women and girls in my area. Fabulous. Okay, well, thank you for sharing all of those. This is also the first time I'm doing this free series. I've been teaching the Women's Leadership Challenge for 4 years. I do random, one-off free workshops. This year was quite important to me to touch more women than just the women in the course. As you'll hear in the Women's Leadership Challenge, it is groups of 8 women each. There's only about 32 women a year that go through it, and it's long and it's a lot of time. You'll see it. It's a financial investment, and it's amazingly transformational. But I also wanted to touch people beyond the Women's Leadership Challenge. And just by showing up here today, I know that each of you is already having a ripple effect in your communities. And that the more that you invest in your own empowerment and your own leadership skills, the greater your ripple effect. And so I also just want to applaud you all for coming today. And I know you might not be able to make all the classes. That's okay. There will be replays that are posted in the Facebook group and on online. I also just wanted to say as well, I usually do lots of breakout groups and interactive stuff, but because it's only an hour, we don't have time. So I just wanted to apologize in advance. That's not my usual tour de course of not doing that kind of stuff. And, in the Women's Leadership Challenge, we do a lot more breakout rooms and stuff like that. Okay, so back to the agenda. So the agenda for the next 9 days, and the other reason, I really wanted to do this year, obviously the US had monumental elections this year, and I'm deeply worried about the state of the US. I'm not just worried about the state of the US, but I'm worried about the example that we're going to set to other countries and economies. I'm also worried about Iran. I'm worried about Gaza. I'm hopeful that Syria will, create a gender equitable constitution and be able to rebuild the country with, women represented and women's rights at the forefront. But I'm, worried about that too. And I think, around the world, there's so much happening with regards to rollback of women's rights, but also things like Syria, of this opening of a doorway of, kind of this closed society to what's next and to opportunities to actually recreate that society with a gender equitable lens. So, this is just a really monumental year for us. So from an agenda standpoint, today we're going to be talking about a feminist leader in 2025. Meg, are you prepared to give a couple comments? Hopefully.
Sure.
Great. Not this second, but I will ping you. So Dr. Meg Bertoni, she is also an alum of the Women's Leadership Challenge, and she works with me now as our head of design at Empower, but she's an expert in violent societies. Tomorrow, we're going to be hearing from Lakaisha Lang. She was in one of my first cohorts. She is a board member at a bunch of foster care organizations, some amazing stories. She rose up at Cox Communications from like an agent to the director of customer care. She wrote a memoir about her life. She's lived through cancer and foster care and all sorts of stuff. She's a crazy, resilient woman. And you're going to be hearing from her about her intrinsic power journey, and also the proprietary process that I've developed called your intrinsic power map, which is about recognizing your unique talents and skills and strengths, and how do you channel that into leadership. Wednesday, we're going to be hearing from Sophie Tarnowska and Abby Allen. Abby Allen is the founder of Bluestick. She was formerly a product manager at Google, and now she is the founder of Bluestick, which is an app that encourages women to that encourages families to do creative activities with their kids on an online app. And Sophie is the founder of Versus, which is a nonprofit that does dialogue between divided societies and education on disinformation, media literacy, etc. So they're also amazing. I spoke about Mariana already, Mariana Diaz-Cruz, and that's really about how do you become a change maker? What does that mean? We're going to try to apply some of what we learned on Friday and do a little bit more interactivity on Friday's session to try to bring it home. I also just realized I keep screwing up the time. Friday and Saturday is 1 to 2. Where is it showing on people's calendars as 12 to 1 or 1 to 2? Which one? Anyone know?
On my calendar, it's 1 to 2.
Okay,
But in the text, it says 12 to 1.
Should be 1 to 2. I'm sorry. They kept putting it in CST. It is 1 to 2. I will change that again for tomorrow. Part of understanding your strengths is knowing what are not your strengths. Details are not my strength. So I apologize in advance. If there's anything detail oriented that missed the mark, I tried. I have great people under me. I still screw up sometimes with dates. Tori just sent me her AI presentation for Saturday, her framework for her AI presentation. She's an instructional designer, has an instructional design company, and is like a tech genius. And she's going to talk about AI, utilizations of AI. One of the things I think too, we really need to look at as AI develops is we can't ignore it. You cannot ignore AI. It's like ignoring a cell phone, or, an invention. Like it is, and it can really work to your benefit while still being aware of the ethics and the morality and making sure that it's not replacing things and, all different stuff, but it really can be your friend and be extremely helpful. The Feminist Leadership Roundtable, that's going to be Ivka Collis. Ivka manages Prometheus, which is an investment, an asset fund. I think I got that wrong. It's asset. They control a lot of money and they invest it, and with a gendered lens, and they have grown precipitously in the last 2 years since she graduated. It's been amazing to see. Garima is an executive coach, and she used to be the head of HR for World Central Kitchen, which is Jose Andres's organization that does humanitarian like food disaster relief in disaster zones. Monday, we're going to be doing live coaching with me. That's where you can ask me anything about the workplace, women, feminist leadership, whatever you want, about the Women's Leadership Challenge, etc. And then Tuesday is going to be really looking forward into 2025. How do you really step up as a leader? Dominique Narciso, also a Women's Leadership Challenge alum. She is also um, she's amazing. She's got so much energy. She's also a speaker, and she's going to be speaking with us also on Tuesday. So that is our agenda that is coming up. Any questions so far about logistics or anything? Okay, cool. All right, so let's keep moving. Okay. The other thing about feminist leadership that I think is really important is to know I don't have all the answers. None of us has all the answers, right? And part of feminist leadership is being honest about what you don't know and what you do know, being honest about your strengths and what your gaps are, being and bringing forward your own wisdom. So as this goes on, if you do have something that is really pressing that you would like to share, you can raise your hand and or put it in the chat. Please, it really does take a village. So if you have resources that you want to share or a book recommendation or a podcast that's coming up for you, that's, please share that with the group. All right. So and then the last thing I think I want to say is what I've really realized is that, we're going to be up against a lot in the next 4 years. And each of you needs to fully step into your power, embrace who you are, and be the strongest, most resilient, most badass version of yourself, because we need each and every one of you so badly. And there's so many people that just give up and they decide, you know what? It's too hard. It's too hard. And stuff like life throws stuff at us. I'm like doing egg freezing right now. It's a disaster. There's people are sick and there's all sorts of stuff going on and the fires in LA. Like there's stuff that happens all the time, but we have to be our most resilient and adaptable selves and rise to that challenge. And we have to do it together. But it's, what I see is a lot of people who are trying to create change, but they don't know who they are. And you cannot create change unless you know who you are and you're so confident in your values and in your convictions, because people will try and push you down the hill. They will try and gaslight you. They will try and tell you the reason that you shouldn't do this. They will try and tell you don't have executive presence. The number of times I've heard that, with women of color, especially, and I look at them like they have executive presence. This is called discrimination. This is just a blanket discrimination, and they're using this as terminology. There's so many people that will try to take your power away. And it's so important to know your values and also to be in community with other women who feel called to do something about it. There's so many opportunities that exist for you to be involved, to take your seat at the table. And each day we're going to be going deeper into feminist leadership and what your role could be going forward. All right, those are my little inspirational words of inspirational wisdom. Okay, let me go back to my slides. So let's see, what is the state of the union? What is the state of women today in the workplace? Actually, let's do a little exercise just because I feel like it. We're going to do a little exercise for a second that I love. It's called I Am Superwoman. And of course, when I was taught it, it was in theater camp and it was I Am Superman. And so, of course, I quickly changed that to I Am Superwoman. And so what I would like you to do is to put into the chat, why are you Superwoman? And what I want you to do is whatever comes to your mind in this moment. You could say, I'm Superwoman because I woke up at 5 a.m. and I'm still here. I am Superwoman because I fed the dog. I'm Superwoman because I just published my book. What's coming to your mind? No judgment, just stream of consciousness. Why are you Superwoman today? Whatever comes into your mind, put it in the chat. Why are you Superwoman? Amazing. Anne just launched a new business. Amazing, Anne. You speak Chinese and make impossible movies to make and get out, but they're amazing and so important and influential. Amazing. Help people create positive change in their communities. Katie is tackling a job in a difficult operating environment with a lot of personality conflicts. That's always fun and takes so much strength and fortitude and will. Beth loves connecting people. Carmen is amazing at empathy and taking a step back. Kat, you showed up for your vision board. I want to see the vision board. When it's done, will you hold it up for everyone?
Yes.
Sheba, this is so badass. Can you please put this in the chat? The civic tech nonprofit. Actually, Sheba, you want to come off mute for a second? What did it tell us about your nonprofit?
Sure. It's essentially, have you heard of Code for America?
Yeah.
It's Code for Pakistan, and I started it 11 years ago, and it works in partnership with a couple of provincial governments in Pakistan, and pairs technologists with government to make public services more accessible, make them human-centered, make them digital, and engages community in doing all of that.
Amazing. And I think, you just brought up another topic, right? Human-centered design and that idea of designing around people instead of just numbers and quotas and all sorts of, hard lines. So Shiva, that's incredible. Please put it in the chat so people can support you.
Well, thank
Rose again. Okay. Sonia is working as an independent consultant. Amazing. And parenting 2 teens and fed both dogs. Karen, this is beautiful. Breaking so many boundaries in both my professional and personal life. Amazing. This is like amazing. So I think it's so clear how, how often we neglect our strengths and we often are always focused on our weaknesses. And each of you really is Superwoman in your own right and doing so much. And you need to know that and to have that as part of your reinforcement as we go forward. Because the rest of the PowerPoint won't be as exciting or happy. So I'll give you a little dose of happiness before we dive into some depressing statistics. All right, Superwomen. And so this is a leadership framework that I really like by Johanna Barsh, centered leadership. So when I was just talking about, being our fullest selves and being as resilient as we can, this model, this particular moment really struck me as really a really good one. Thinking about how do we manage our energy? How do we regenerate energy even when we're depressed or tired or sad or feel hopeless? How do we get into flow state, which is where we are most creative, insightful, creating, films and art, etc. How do we learn optimism even in the crappiest circumstances while still being grounded in reality and not being so idealistic that we're divorced? How do we connect and build networks in a meaningful way? How do we engage? How do we take our seat at the table? How do we claim it? Or maybe we say, forget the table. I don't even want to be at that table. I'm going to build my own damn table. How do we do that? And how do we have meaning in our lives? And that part of that is knowing your strengths, understanding your purpose, what brings you joy. All of those things are part of our key pieces of leadership. And then how do we manage change? Change is, we're living in what they call a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or the new terminology is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. How do we navigate that craziness of the world and what's thrown at us in both our personal lives and outside? And that's something I'm kind of seeing right now after this election season is women who are having like this existential personal crisis, but it's rooted in the societal context and what's going on in society. And it's hard when you have both that personal piece and that societal piece coming at you. So this is a great book called Centered Leadership by Johanna Barsh. Highly recommend it. Okay, so let's look at the state of the union or the state of the world's women. This will focus more on America, but we'll have some global statistics as well. So what we're looking at in terms of the most recent World Economic Forum gender gap report is we're seeing that it's going to take 134 years to close the global gender gap. What are the 4 factors in the global gender gap? Educational attainment, more girls in schools, political empowerment. This is usually how many women are in local governments and how many women are in parliament or in Congress or heads of state. Economic participation and opportunity. So how much are women able to participate in the economy? So things like financial inclusion, involvement in the banking system, labor rates, et cetera, and health and survival. This can encompass disease to domestic violence, to femicide, to child marriage, all those kinds of aspects. So what we're seeing is some improvements on educational attainment, political empowerment. Excuse me, no, it's the opposite way. Educational attainment has, hold on, let me come back to this in a second. I need to get my head straight for a second. But what we're seeing is that it's 134 years to close the global gender gap. And let me just go back and make sure I'm saying the correct thing before I tell you that's correct. Health and survival, we're not sure yet. The global top 10 when it comes to gender equality, Iceland and Finland. In Finland, this always shocks me. The cost of high quality childcare for one child in the US is $2,500 a month. In Finland, for the highest income earners, it is 350 euros a month. And then for the second child, it is 175 euros a month. And the third child, it is half of that. Whereas in the US, you could spend, $20,000, $30,000 just on one child's childcare. So Finland's care economy is amazing. Norway, Sweden, this was kind of interesting. New Zealand, Nicaragua, and Namibia. Obviously, we don't see US there. Ireland had that big gain of legalizing abortion this year, which was pretty cool, or I think it was last year. And the biggest gains regionally have been in Latin America. Natalia, I wonder, not to put you in the spot, but have you seen some of those gains in Latin America? Since we know.
Yes, definitely. And for example, we study a lot women's participation in boards and in main like C positions, and we've certainly seen in the last few years a gain in those positions. So yes, and we do have childcare in most of for example, in Colombia, we do have 3 months of childcare, and we just had more weeks for also dads to be part of those care in Colombia, particularly.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
Anyone else from any of the other countries that are on here, just out of curiosity, that wanted to comment? I don't think I saw anyone from Europe because it's so late at night. I'll see it tomorrow. We have seen in global parliaments that they've doubled by since 2006 to 33% from 19%. US Congress, wow, 29%. It's pathetic. I don't know why we can't seem to get up there. The US loves to tell other countries that they need to have quotas with regards to gender equality in their parliaments, but if anyone said that to us, we'd be like, no way. It's thrilling. But, in the US, we're going to see no women leading House committees for the first time in 20 years, which is terrifying because, the committees are the ones that really bring bills to the floor and get all these things done. 25 heads of state. This is just female heads of state. This is just within the countries that were studied in the global the gender gap. We're also seeing rising income inequality. So even if women are participating in the formal economy, we're just seeing a bigger gap between the rich and poor. In the United States, that cutting the child tax care credit will push single mothers further into poverty, as will the end of, as has the overturn of Roe v. Wade and increasing families having children that are not able to afford them. Armed conflict, 15% of women and girls live within, I think it's 20 miles of armed conflict, and that can cause all sorts of health issues, displacement, education consequences, et cetera. Obviously, climate crises. What we're seeing in LA is just devastating from so many angles. And, I think climate is one of those things that it just touches everywhere. There's nowhere that's not experiencing this. And it's something that's so important to be able to look at. And we know from the research that climate change is more likely to have a mal effect on women and girls. That being said, if we did close the gender gap, there's an estimate, and all of these stats are from the Global Gender Gap Report, that this would increase global GDP by more than 20%. So getting women into the formal economy. Yet, what we're seeing is that more than 4 in 10 women who have partners say that 4 in 10 women that have partners say that they still do the majority, if not all, of the care work, whether it's childcare and or housework. So I think that's a hard part about women rising, is that our responsibilities have not necessarily decreased in the home, but our responsibilities at work have gone up. And how do you manage everything? I know a lot of you, and I've had a lot of women in the course who are from the sandwich generation of having kids and elderly parents, and are trying to balance those two in societies that don't have a good structure for elderly care and or childcare. And it's really, really, really hard. And I admire you, by the way, anyone here that is going through that. The McKinsey Lean In Women in the Workplace report, let's look at some stats from there. What we're seeing is they've always called this, historically, it's called the broken rung theory. And I've been looking at the women in the workplace studies from McKinsey for since they started probably a decade ago. And a decade ago, 2015. And what it shows is that women usually start about at par with men when they're entering the workforce. And then as they go up, as the positions go up, the number of women drops down. Obviously, you see the number of women in the C-suite, is at the least, and there's still more CEOs named John than women CEOs. So there has been improvement, as you can see, and I had women of color in here, but I took it out because the graphic just got too messy. But you've also seen improvement in women of color, but it's still very small with regards to women of color. That was America, but if you wanted to look at globally, the numbers are a little bit better in the C-suite, but not by much. This was really interesting to me, and I think this is one of the things that I'm worried about and looking at right now, is that women getting hired into leadership positions has been going down, which is a little odd. And I think that it's part of the anti-DEI backlash, frankly, which we'll mention today. But this is worrisome, that it's been dropping to below 2021 levels. The other thing that we've seen, and I think this also has to do with the anti-DEI backlash, is that even though all of the research shows that giving women mentorship, investing in sponsorship programs, investing in leadership accelerator programs like we do for companies and global organizations, there's been less interest in doing women-only programs. I will say the good thing from a trend perspective is I've seen more interest in leadership training for everyone, which I think is a good thing, but realizing that men need leadership skills and emotional intelligence and all sorts of things as well. But there's, just a decline of focus on women, even though we're still not equitable within the workforce. This also is something I think we need to pay attention to that worries me a little bit, is what is happening to young men. And I was listening to an interview with Richard Reeves, I believe, who wrote of Boys and Men, and he talks about how young men jumped in their support of Trump versus the last election. I also gave an interview about the 4B movement, and which is women who are decrying. It's based on South Korea. They're basically giving up sex, marriage, kids, and dating. In basically after Trump was elected. And when I was doing my research, I was finding really scary stuff, like men writing on women's walls about rape squads and they deserve to be raped, and the 19th Amendment should be overturned, and really troubling things. And we're also seeing mental health go down. I mean, one of the things about women that has gone up, which you probably already know, is that women now outpace men in terms of college degrees and master's degrees earned. But young men are clearly having a crisis of confidence, of identity, of who are they in this world. And I don't think we can ignore that in our fight for gender equality, because there's backlash that's happening now from those young men against women that is really bad. This is just showing that, how many more young men voted for Biden, or excuse me, for Biden versus Harris. But you'll also notice that women also voted more overwhelmingly this year as well vote more for Biden. Protest movements all over the world. We're going to move through that. We're going to move through this. We're going to move through this. Moving through this. I mean, the other thing that the meta ending fact checking and, the tech companies now all of a sudden posing up to Trump is very worrisome. The amount of disinformation that is out there. Elon Musk now owning X, which is now just this wasteland of disinformation. And that's very, very troublesome, is seeing so much disinformation and not having facts surrounding it. So that's something that I think we're going to need to really watch out for and be active about. Mental health, Roe v. Wade, we know this, 171,000 people traveled across state lines for abortion in 2023. Something else that I don't know what's going to happen with mass deportations. The experts we'll see what the administration's actually able to do. ProPublica has done some really horrifying and sad reports on undocumented migrants in Texas, and specifically how they're not seeking abortion care because they're scared they're going to be deported if they try to get reproductive care. Well, there is no abortion care in Texas, excuse me, but even reproductive care, because they're scared they're going to be deported. And they're seeing a rise in infanticide, which means actually people trying to get rid of their baby because they don't want to have a child, but there's no access to reproductive care. Really sad, really horrifying. The good news is Missouri had a complete ban on abortion. Missouri was one state that reversed its abortion ban. The other thing we're seeing is a brain drain of OBGYNs from restrictive states. So all of these states are now having deserts where you can't even get care as a pregnant woman, let alone an abortion, because there's no OBGYNs because they don't want to work there. And that's really scary, especially in a country where maternal mortality has been on the rise for years. And we're the only developed country in the world that has had rising infant and maternal mortality, despite the fact that we go everywhere else in the world and tell them how to, do better. But then here we don't. And I'm flying through all of this, so I apologize for that. Violence in the public square, this is also something that's very troubling, is the amount of women who are being targeted, whether it is online, whether it is physically in person. There are less women running for office this time around than last time, because so many congresswomen are now spending their meager budgets on security, on bodyguards, because their lives are being threatened. And they feel like they are in danger. And this is something that I think is really worrisome. And as feminist leaders, I think we really need to stand up to violence, whether, whatever form that takes, and misogyny, and recognize that misogyny can easily turn into physical violence. Meg, I wonder if you have a couple words on violent societies and just thinking about America this year and, some of your research.
Sure. Essentially, I'm defining violent society as one where the governing body doesn't have a monopoly on violence. So say in medieval England, you could have all your stuff stolen by Bob, and you have to go to Bob yourself and get all your stuff back because the king doesn't care what goes on between these two peasants or merchants or whatever. There's really nothing to be done about it. So it's essentially a state of retribution between equals as opposed to justice from above. So currently, what's especially concerning about the US right now is that we're kind of showing all the signs of slipping into that. A bunch of things kind of herald that, like different judicial systems for elites and everybody else. That's been going on for a while. Private prisons kind of outsource the government monopoly on violence to private companies. And perhaps most concerning, plenty of people feel that they have to take the law into their own hands. So, like, for example, a mass shooting is less concerning to me than someone in a mall whipping out a gun and firing back at the shooter. Because it suggests that, you know, nobody's waiting for someone who's actually qualified to come handle it. You're just kind of taking it up themselves. So I'm very concerned about that. I've recently started doing more work around disinformation and how it starts and perpetuates violent societies, and that is certainly worrisome at the moment as well. Especially with some platforms just kind of saying, oh, the hell with it. Like Meta to suck up to Trump is kind of just like, oh, well, we're just not going to fact check anymore. We're just going to let everyone say whatever the hell they want. So that's also part of the system. So I'm especially concerned about what's happening because to my mind, January 6th was a violent performance. You know, we've kind of been in a cold civil war for a long time, and it's about to get hot. I'm actually considering emigrating at the moment, looking at my options. But you know, I'll stick around as long as I can. I don't know. Questions for me?
If anyone has questions for Meg, I think for the sake of time, Meg, we'll just have them put them in the chat. But you know, and I think that's a really interesting point about people kind of just this civil unrest. I found something interesting, Kat, I don't know if it was in your class, but when I was doing leadership training for the passport agency, how all these people were assaulting passport officers because they thought that they could get a state passport and relinquish their American passport for a state passport. And then the passport agent said, you can't do that. There is no Alabama passport. And they were physically attacking the passport like officers. So, this is something that we need to really, I think, be aware of and stand against. And to train leaders to, how do we come up against this? All right, moving merrily along. Sorry, I promise you the rest of the classes aren't as depressing. They're more empowering, but I just want us to be aware of where we're at. And unfortunately, it's not great this year. So this is, I think, this is the Supreme Court decision that shut down affirmative actions in colleges. It's had so many terrible repercussions in that all sorts of groups, companies, et cetera, are being sued for doing anything that's identity focused, which is one of the reasons I think that some companies are not doing women's focused programs because they are worried they're going to be sued for discriminating against men or just doing it for women, as an example. This is, I think, not like just really expressing itself in so many ways. I Fund Women. The women here from Women's Funding Network know I Fund Women and Hello Alice, both organizations that help women entrepreneurs. They were both sued for partnering with companies to provide grants to small Black women-owned businesses who have like no leg up and just need a little bit of help. It is not easy being a women entrepreneur. We have 2% of the global procurement, and they had to post crowdfunding desperate messages to try to get funding to pay the legal bills to stay open. So we're seeing this spate of lawsuits against identity. In Florida now, they have gotten rid of gender studies, Jewish studies, African American studies, anything that is identity based. And that is all coming from that Supreme Court decision. I mean, we're also seeing some companies that are standing up and saying, no, we're going to continue with our commitment to DEI. And we know that diversity, equity, inclusion means good business because it's more innovation. We have more voices at the table who represent different viewpoints. We're getting the best talent. But we're also seeing a lot that are now backtracking because they know as well that a Trump administration is totally anti-DEI, as evidenced by Project 2025, which talks about deleting sexual orientation and gender identity, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, reproductive health, abortion out of every federal rule, regulation, contract, grant regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. This is harmful not only from a rights perspective, but it also makes the analysis wrong. So, for example, when you take a gendered analysis to policymaking, you start to see if you don't consider gender, you screw up. So, for example, when China did a one-child policy and didn't realize that most of the kids who were going to be aborted or sold into sex trafficking or, sometimes killed or, were going to be girls. And then what was going to happen decades later? Oh, guess what? There's no women for boys to marry. Problem. So you get bad results from a socioeconomic and GDP perspective when you don't consider gender in the equation. This is an article. I'm happy to say I just wrote a very long article about HR 9495, which will be published in New Lines magazine right before inaugurations, hopefully a week. I will share it with all of you. It is about this bill, and this bill is really important because it represents something that I think we're going to see a lot coming forward, which is a wolf in sheep's clothing, something that is brought forward and it is shown to, we're not fact checking anymore because this is a good thing and here's why. We're passing this bill. So this bill was essentially proposed and it looked like a pro-Israel bill. It looked like a bill that would basically, it literally is called the Stop Terror Financing Bill. And what it looks like on the surface is that you can, get rid of a 501c3 if it's funding a terrorist entity. So all these people were going to sign on it, including tons of Democrats. And then ACLU looked into it and realized there's already legislation that means you can shut down a nonprofit if it is funding a terrorist entity. And this gives unilateral jurisdiction to the Secretary of the Treasury to investigate any 501c3 nonprofit. They have 90 days to respond. There's very little evidence provided. Nonprofits already have no money. So then, the money to mount a legal defense is not there. And they could just unilaterally be stripped of their 501c3 status. This is deeply worrying because 501c3 nonprofits include universities, they include healthcare organizations, they include theaters, they include ProPublica, which is publishing the stuff about abortion. They include arts organizations. And so I think what we're going to be seeing is the weaponization of things to get rid of, and the things in the words in the little triangles. These are all things that, and in this article, I look at the descent of Hungary and Russia into autocracy, and these are some of the elements that are central: corruption, getting rid of opposition voices, intolerance and deportation of immigrants, high rates of gender equality, controlling the media. And so this bill passed the House already. It is up for ratification by the Senate. It probably will not pass right now, but it will come back. The House will vote for it, and hopefully the Senate won't. This would have a huge, huge, huge impact. Getting rid of the unilateral ability of the administration to just close nonprofits. What we saw in Russia is this closed a lot of women's rights nonprofits, especially at a time when domestic violence had just been taken from decriminalized. It's horrible. And it led to a huge spike in domestic violence in Russia and a huge decrease in gender equity in Russia. So I think we're going to see a lot more things like this that are kind of the wolf in sheep's clothing. I know we're already at time. Lots more fun stuff here. So I'll just say, let's just, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and just say, in closing, we have a lot of challenges that are coming up. Whoops. We have a lot of challenges that are coming up against us. And like I said, we are going to have to be our strongest, most resilient, most empowered selves to take on what's coming. We're going to have to band together in community, and also figure out how do we get stuff done in the halls of Congress. And that's something I'm working on right now with a Georgetown professor, is to create a women's leadership program connected to advocacy in swing states with community leaders. And we're trying to find funding for that right now, so that we can train lots of community leaders to do this work, and get stuff passed in Congress and stand up against bills like this, which seem innocuous, but can really have a devastating effect on civil society, on democracy, and on our rights. So I know it's not the most, happy thing, but what I will say that is the bright light to me is all of you showing up, the things that I saw in the chat that you all are doing, from connecting other people to having your own nonprofits, to making films, to, supporting girls' education in Pakistan, to my coaches here, to coaching me, to coach you all. And yes, Congress does not rebuild before passing them. It is unbelievably frightening. But, to researching violent societies, to having civic tech nonprofits, I mean, you all are the bright light, and I'm dedicated to helping you all rise and be your best, most empowered selves, because I know it's a lot. So let's just end today with what is your biggest insight from today's session? If you could just share in the chat your biggest insight from today's session. And while you're doing that, I'll just say tomorrow's topic is your intrinsic power map, which is looking at your talents, your strengths, your values, all the things that make you you. This is a proprietary process that I developed after 15 years of coaching to help women step into their full power. And Lakaisha is going to be coming and talking a little bit about her intrinsic power journey. Other information is power. Absolutely, Anne. Yeah, we don't give up. Absolutely, more impactful as a group. I was thinking today about Red Rover. You know, what you used to hold hands in a line? How like we need to hold hands with each other so that they can't break the chain. But if we're not holding hands, then they get through us. And I think we need to kind of stand together as Red Rover. And I know it's at the hour, so if you have to drop off, please feel free to drop off. Beautifully said, Kathleen. Band together to stand strong against worrisome events. Women matter and are important, and we make our own tables if we can't sit at the ones we want. Beautifully said. Yeah, what's up with young men? It is fascinating and horrifying. Hang on for dear life. Oh, Beth. Yeah, diverse. I mean, that's so important. And that we really recognize each other's, the beauty that we bring as diverse individuals with diverse talents, backgrounds. Again, like we're stronger when we're in full recognition of one another and are intersectional in nature. All right, everyone. Well, thank you. And I appreciate you. Thank you, Meg, for speaking tonight. And Meg is going to be here in the future as well. So appreciate you, Meg, for giving us some feedback on violent societies. And I'm sorry I sped through all of this content, but tomorrow be sure to come back for your intrinsic power map. Replays will be in the Facebook group. If you're have any insights from today that you want to share in the Facebook group or have further discussion, please do so. And if not, I will see you all mañana. Thank you for being here. Muchísimas gracias. Un placer. Good night, everyone. Have a great night.